Have you studied for 5, 10, or even 15 years and still struggled to speak clearly when making a conversation? In today's video, I'm going to share a simple truth that you may not want to hear. But if you're willing to listen and understand what I'm saying, you will become fluent much more quickly. We're going to look at the difference between studying and learning English. You'll see why it's better to be a learner instead of just a student. And at the very end, I'll give you a 3-step formula to help you change from being a passive student to becoming an active learner. Let's unravel the mystery. My name is Herbert Lee. I've been a Toastmaster for over 40 years, a presentation coach for 35, and an English teacher for well over 20. I became an English teacher because I saw the frustration people had when they wanted to become fluent English speakers. So, I researched and developed special techniques that could help anyone achieve English fluency in a very short time. When I saw the results my students got, I kept researching and developing more materials and better strategies. Because English is not my mother tongue, I had to learn English just like you. So I'm very aware of the challenges and pitfalls. But the good news is that I've found ways to overcome these challenges. Today, I'm sharing some thoughts I have observed as an English teacher. I grew up on the east coast of Canada in a small place called Halifax. When I was growing up in Canada, we all heard this poem. The more you learn, the more you know. The more you know, the more you forget. The more you forget, the less you know. The less you know, the more you study. The more you study, the more you learn. So why study? It was funny for me when I was growing up, but it's actually giving people a negative view of learning. Now, let's discover the difference between studying and learning. Let's start with studying English. When you study, you usually sit at a desk with books and notebooks. You might be in a classroom or at home. You focus on grammar rules, vocabulary lists, and doing exercises. Studying is about memorizing information and passing tests. It's what we do in school most of the time. So now let's talk about learning English. Learning is different than studying. When you learn, you use the language in real life. You talk to people, watch movies, read books, and listen to music in English. And you make mistakes and learn from them. Learning is about using English to communicate and understand things. So, what's the big difference between studying and learning? Let's compare them. The goals of studying and learning are completely different. When you study, your goal is often to pass a test or get a good mark. But when you learn, your goal is to use English in real life. You want to talk to people, understand TV shows, or read books in English. So, how do you do studying and how do you do learning? Studying usually means sitting quietly and working alone. Even in your classroom, you're basically working alone. You might do grammar exercises or memorize words. Learning, on the other hand, is much more active. You talk to people, watch videos, and try to write stories in English. The focus of the two ways is completely different. So here's what we focus on when we study. When you study, you focus a lot on rules and correct answers. You worry about making mistakes. But when you learn, you focus on communicating. You're trying to understand and be understood, even if you make some mistakes. So how do you feel when you're studying as opposed to learning? Studying sometimes can feel boring or stressful. You might worry about tests or grades, getting a good mark. Learning, on the other hand, can be more fun and exciting. You feel great when you understand something new or have a great conversation in English. What about what we remember when we study as opposed to what we remember when we learn? When you study, you often forget things right after the test. But when you learn through experience, you remember things much better. The English you use in real life sticks in your mind much longer. How you measure success when studying is different than how you measure success when you're learning. In studying, success means getting a good grade or a high test score. When you're learning, success means being able to use English in real life. It's about having great conversations or understanding English media. Now let's talk about why it's better to be a learner instead of just a student of English. First, learning helps you use English in real life. When you're a learner, you practice English in ways that matter to you. You might chat with friends, watch your favorite shows, or read about topics you like. This makes English a part of your life, not something you do for school. Second, learning is more fun than studying. When you learn, you get to choose what you want to do in English. You can play games, sing songs, or talk about things that you enjoy. And this makes you want to use English more often. Third, learning helps remember English much better. When you use English in real situation, your brain connects the language to real experiences. And experience is a much better teacher than rote learning or studying. This helps you remember words and phrases much better than if you just memorize them from a book. Fourth, learning builds your confidence. As a learner, you practice using English even when it's not perfect. You get used to making mistakes, learning from them, and correcting them. And this makes you brave about using English in real life. Fifth, learning never stops. When you're a student, you might think you're done when you finish a course or you get a certificate. But as a learner, you keep improving your English all the time, even after you're fluent. Now, let's talk about something really important. Studying and learning are different in how active you are. Studying is often a passive activity. When you study, these are the things you might do. Read textbooks without doing anything else. Listen to lectures without asking questions. Copy notes from a screen or a whiteboard. Memorize lists of words or rules. Watching YouTube videos, which is what you're doing right now. If you're watching it like you watch a movie, you're studying. You're just getting more information. If you want to learn, you have to do something about what you saw on the video. In all these cases, you're not really doing much. You're just taking in information. It's like watching TV or YouTube. The information comes to you, but you don't interact with it, and you don't do anything from what you watched. Learning, on the other hand, is all about being active. When you learn, you ask questions and look for answers. You try out new words and phrases in actual conversations. You solve problems using English. You create things like stories or videos in English. And you can teach others what you know. And that really helps you learn. When you learn, you're not just sitting there. You're doing things with the language. You're using it. You're playing with it and figuring out how it actually works. This active engagement is why learning is so powerful. When you're active, your brain works harder. You think more deeply about the language. You make connections between what you know and what's new, and this helps you understand and remember English much better. So, if you want to really improve your English, try to be more active. Take action and do something with what you learned. Learning by doing is very powerful. If you watched the video up until now, you're probably a serious learner. If you would like to crack the conversation code, get a copy of my free report, The 5 Biggest Mistakes in English Conversation. Okay, back to the show. I'm glad you stayed until the very end. So you may think that you've wasted all those years and now you have to start all over again. Not really. Everything you learned when you studied English is still very useful. And when you become an active learner, the learning is much faster than you think. You must be willing to make mistakes and learn from them. The human brain is very good at that if you give it a chance. You won't need to spend years to become fluent in English, but you need to change how you learn. So, how can you change from studying to learning? Here's a simple 3-step guide to help you become a fluent English speaker. Step number 1, make English a part of your daily life. Start by bringing English into your everyday activities. Here are some ideas. Change your phone language to English. Listen to English music while you're doing your chores. Watch YouTube videos in English about your hobbies and interests. Follow English speakers on social media. Read news articles in English about topics that you like. The key is to use English for things you already do and enjoy. This way, you're learning without feeling it's like work. Step number 2, focus on communication, not perfection. Remember, the goal of learning English is to communicate. Don't worry too much about making mistakes. Instead, focus on getting your message across. Here's how. Practice speaking English, even if you make errors. Try to explain things in English when you don't know a specific word. Ask people to correct you only when you can't be understood. Write messages or posts in English and share them with others. Join English conversation groups or language exchange apps. The more you practice communicating, which is speaking and listening, the more confident and fluent you will become. And step number 3, create opportunities to use your English regularly. Look for ways to use English often in your life. And this could mean finding an English-speaking friend or language partner. But treat them nicely. Don't treat them like a speaking dummy where you just speak and speak and speak. You don't listen to what they're saying and you don't answer the questions that they give you to answer. Joining clubs or groups that use English. Find a volunteer organization that does their work in English. Take up a hobby that involves using English. Setting personal goals like having one English conversation every day. Here's a good one. If you live in a city where there's lots of tourists, you'll get a lot of English speakers. You can do them a service by going up to them and saying, "Excuse me, Are you lost? Can I help you and give you directions? Then you get to really practice your English in a really practical way. And you're doing them a favor. They will love it. And they won't judge your English because they're very happy that someone speaks English and is giving them directions. Just be sure that you know how to give directions properly when you do this. So, the more you use English, the more natural it will feel. Now, let's sum up what we've learned today. We talked about the difference between studying and learning English. Studying is about memorizing and passing tests. Learning is using English in real life and things that you enjoy. We saw that it's much better to be a learner of English because you use English in ways that matter to you. It's much more fun and interesting. You remember English better and you build confidence. You keep improving all the time. And we looked at 3 steps to change from studying to learning. 1. Make English part of your daily life. 2. Focus on communication, not perfection. And 3. Create opportunities to use English regularly. Remember, becoming fluent in English is a journey, and it takes time and practice. But by changing from just studying to really learning, you can make this journey fun and rewarding. And the journey is much faster. So, are you ready to become an English learner? Start today by choosing just one small way to bring more English into your life. Every little step helps. Thanks for watching today. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe to my channel. And let me know in the comments what's one way you'll start learning, not just studying English this week. I'd love to hear from you. It's Herbert Lee wishing you great success on your learning journey. And until next time, happy learning.